Hi everyone, welcome to the BNS podcast this Sunday. We appreciate you guys for always joining this podcast. Come each Sunday. Now, please do well to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Spotify. Please do not forget to your family members, your friends to join us. Now, we have an amazing guest today, and his story is amazing. The way he navigated life, and he's here today to share his story. So I wouldn't take, the glory from you, Terry. Terry, I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience. Terry, please go ahead. Who is Terry?
Hey, well, I'm of course Terry. I'm a burn survivor. I've been a burn survivor for 33 years, and in those 33 years of being a burn survivor, I have really been on a journey to be an advocate as well as someone to share hope along my journey.
Wow. Sharing your hope along your journey. That's amazing, Terry. Now, Terry, I'll first of all start with this question. Now, at 6 years old, Terry, 73% of your skin was burnt.
Mm-hmm.
Take us back to what really happened that day, because I know it's a lot. Maybe because you are 6 years old, you won't really remember some things, but take us back to the things that you could remember that happened that fateful day.
Yeah, no, most certainly. I remember the day very, very well, even though it was 33 years ago. Um, I was 6 years old and I was living with my dad and my two older brothers. And we lived in the middle of the state of Nevada in a tiny town called Hawthorne. And it was
Okay.
literally out in the middle of the desert, just like what you would think in a movie it would be like. And one night, my dad asked me to go find my brothers and bring them home for dinner because it was about that time. So I went out and I was looking for my brothers. They were walking the neighbor's dog because the neighbors were out of town. And I eventually found them by listening for their voices. And I found that they were only a couple of houses away from where we were living. And when I got to where their voices were, I know they were in a carport next to a house, but they had a bowl down at their feet. And what I didn't realize is down in that bowl, it was full of kerosene that they had found while they were out walking the dogs. And they were actively trying to light it on fire to see if it was flammable. Well, by the time I entered the scene and was down by where they were at, they had finally got it to light on fire with a lighter and it flashed over and it scared them. So they ended up kicking the bowl. But what they didn't realize is that it was in the exact direction where I was standing. They didn't know I was standing there. It just happened to have been a very freak accident. But when they kicked the bowl of kerosene, it flew at me, and the whole entire bowl that of its contents hit me in the chest and ended up wrapping around me. Now, at first, I didn't realize I was the one that was on fire. Like I thought everything around me was on fire. I was 6 years old. Like I couldn't comprehend everything that was going on. Until finally the pain really kicked in and like 1 plus 1 finally became 2 for me and I knew I was on fire and I tried to stop drop bolt. It didn't work. That kind of a fuel isn't something you can just roll out of. However, what was really fortunate for me that day was the neighbor was just coming home from work and saw that I was running around in the driveway on fire. He grabbed a sleeping bag that he had in his car and he came over and he tackled me with it. And that's what ended up putting me out. So my neighbor is really my unsung hero of my journey there. Um, but once I was put out, I was taken to the hospital. They didn't quite have what it took to really take care of me at the hospital because I live in the middle of the desert in a tiny little town, so they didn't quite have the facilities to take care of third and fourth degree burns on 73% of my body. However, the next string of luck came that there was a airplane at the airport right outside of town that was capable of flying me down to Las Vegas, and that's where I was actually taken, and that's where I got my first set of life-saving treatment. I was in the hospital for like a solid year to begin with.
Wow.
And that first beginning of that solid year, 2 months of that, I was in a medically induced coma. But I was in and out of the hospital after that solid year for about 4 more years. So I had about a solid 5 year recovery time frame physically. I had 58 surgeries from that because of that day. Yeah, it's that day, August 23rd, 1992, really shaped a lot for me.
You've really passed through, and yet you're still here. Share your stories so that people will understand you and know how you feel. Now, Tay, if I may ask you, do you believe in God?
Yes, I definitely certainly do.
Okay, now, so you believe that God put your neighbor in a position to save you, right?
Well, I believe everything happens for, yeah, I believe that, everything is definitely set in place for a specific reason and everything. Yeah.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, let's move away a bit. How about your recovery journey in the hospital? How was it like? Did you respond to treatments fast, or were there times that you couldn't believe that you will survive this? Although I saw somewhere in your bio where you said when you were on fire, you thought you were dead. So can you take us back to that moment?
Yeah. Um, yeah, when my accident happened and that moment that I thought I was gone, it was because I had tried to stop, drop, and roll. Nothing was working. And I was out of options in my own head. And so, like, when the neighbor tackled me with the sleeping bag, it was lights out for me essentially because I was underneath a big sleeping bag, right? So for me, I thought everything was just that was it. I thought it was lights out. Um, Now the realization that it wasn't lights out came just because all the pain started rushing back in and everything like that. Uh, the hospital trip though was very, very um, it's a lot of in and out in the beginning. And what I mean by that is just like I remember bits and pieces of the hospital from the beginning, but due to like the medications and everything else, because like I said, the first 2 months I was in a medically induced coma. So like I was just gone to the world for at least a solid 2 months afterwards. But when it started to come back towards like the whole in and out of surgeries things for me is when I really kind of started to get a lot more time this side, I would say is what it is. Just when I say this side, I mean back in reality, not underneath surgery or in a coma kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
but those little fragments of in between with the surgeries and everything like that, there was a lot of instability, I would say, because like when you don't have a grip on reality like what we have right now, and you have the grip of reality through survival and just little bits and pieces, it's a much different headspace to be in. I didn't understand fully what was going on because, again, I
Yeah.
was 6 years old. How could I really comprehend what it was that I was going through? So there was a lot of confusion on my side, just trying to figure out what had happened and what was happening and what was happening to me. But the more that time went on, and then the more that the surgery started to get spread out a little bit. In other words, when I wasn't in and out of surgeries consistently, when I had more downtime to be in bed and to not have to be sedated or anything like that, it took a while for me to really get to the point to where um, like I could really figure out what was going on. Once I figured out what was going on and that life had really changed, it was really through my dad really being there for me in that moment, really kind of coaching me through that whole section of that. Uh, but it was a lot to take on, like there in the very beginning time frame of the hospital.
Yeah, I totally understand. I wanted to ask you how about your support system, but you just mentioned your dad. That means your dad was there throughout your whole journey, right?
hmm Yeah, honestly, the relationship with my dad is very interesting. Like my dad is honestly, he was my best friend. Uh, my dad was a very strict person before the accident. He changed a lot through the accident, and as a parent would, obviously. but if it wasn't really for the relationship that I had with my dad prior to the accident, I don't know how I would have really pulled through after the accident because, like I said, he became a huge person to me. Right after my accident happened, I was fully covered in bandages. My eyes were swollen shut. I was tubes in my mouth and down my throat and everything like that. So I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. And it was my dad who figured out that I was actually awake after like a while. I can't even, I don't know how much time it was. It could have been days, it could have been weeks. But he found out that I was like laying there awake when they all thought I was asleep and I wasn't. And he brushed up against my feet and I'm super ticklish. And my feet were not burned. And when he brushed up against my feet and I kind of reacted to it, he realized I was in there. And so, like, he actually developed a system with me. Like, my big right toe was for yes, my big left toe was for no. And I'll tell you what, when you're completely disconnected from the world, completely disconnected from reality and everything else, having even just the slightest bit of communication like that was it meant the world, and it really gave me that strength to push forward and want to actually keep moving forward.
Wow. That's a very nice thing because some people out there they don't have this type of relationship with their dad or even with their mom. But at least you actually experienced that with your dad, which is amazing. Which is amazing. But moving forward, apart from your dad, was anybody also there as your support system during your time at the hospital, or just your dad?
The time at the hospital, it's actually for me. I had a lot of support from my care team, my nurses and my doctors.
Yeah.
They were absolutely incredible. But there was summer camp for kids, for burn kids, is a portion of my life that really changed for me. Was going to summer camp, I should say. Like a year after my accident happened, and when I went to camp for the very first time, they had archery, and I wanted to do archery, but I couldn't physically do it. I just didn't have the hand strength or dexterity to do so. However, there's a guy named Roger. Roger was the one that set up archery and did it for all the kids for all the years for like 20 some odd years, up to the point when I first started going. And he saw me sitting there and he's like, "Hey, you're going to do archery?" And I told him I can't. And he said, "Well, just 1 second." He came back with a grocery bag and some duct tape. He had me hold a bow and he duct taped my hand to a bow. And I was able to start shooting bows downrange. Like, and this is like not even a full year after my accident yet that I'm shooting arrows downrange at summer camp. And his name was Roger, like I said. And I'll tell you what, 33 years later, I still use the things that he taught me. The things he taught me are also what got me into firefighting, what got me into commercial diving training. It's the mental thought that, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you put your mind to it. The only person that should ever tell you no is you. And you should really question yourself as to why you tell yourself no.
Shout out to Roger because many people don't even know what it means to have a support system because
Yeah.
once they're there for you, they will help you, to recover quickly, both mentally and physically. And for you to mention Roger here, that means he was really, really impactful in your life. And we thank Roger for the contribution he has done for you in your life. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, Terry, I wanted to ask you a question. Was forgiveness towards your brothers who caused the accident something that came naturally, or was it a journey? Because that's a very important question. Most people, they come out in life to hate their siblings because of the scars they have in life. Was it naturally for you to forgive them, or was it a journey, something you thought about, with time before you could, muster the courage to forgive them?
Mhm. No, that's a great question. And it's actually one that I get all the time. And it's a very common question. Um, I don't think I had a single moment where I held this against them. In my book that I'm writing, I state that this is simply a scenario where curiosity outpaced understanding. This is why accidents are called accidents. I'm very, 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 very lucky that I was able to, at the age that I was, at 6, 7 years old, come to the conclusion and the understanding that, hating my brothers wasn't going to do me any good. That, harboring anything towards them wasn't going to do me any good. That waiting for any kind of like uh, apology was going to do any good. I didn't comprehend any of that really, because the way that I had seen it is like my accident caused me to die 6 times. And there's some lessons that I've pulled out of some of those things that I've experienced because of that, that made me realize that, life is too short and beautiful to harbor things that are just going to act as anchors on you. Like you could seriously want to try and get an apology for something that may never come, and you waste all that time. You may end up harboring feelings towards somebody that only just really poisons your own soil. And that doesn't do you any good either. And I feel very fortunate that I've not carried any of that with me, because that would have been just an additional journey that I had to have gone through. And I feel like that was a complete level that was just skipped. And I'm very fortunate for it, that I was able to do that.
Oh, Terry, I really mentality. This is wonderful because there are so many people out there who would forever hate their siblings because of this, because of this call that you have. The whole intimidation and the bullying, just narrow it down to what your siblings did to you. Okay, thank you very much for having that mentality, Terry.
Mhm.
Um, just go for a short break, Terry. When we get back, I have an important question for you. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, viewers. You're welcome back to the BNN podcast. Now, if you don't know who's on your screen, this is Bruno, and I'm sitting in for Ike. Ike O. He'll be with us shortly, but he's not here today, so I'll be your co-host for today. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, this is Terry. He has an amazing story. He's a born survivor. He has passed through a lot in life, but he's here to still share his story with us so that we can learn. So please take out one or two from his story. All right, Terry. Now, I have another question for you, which is very, very interesting. Now, Terry, were there moments when you felt defined by your scars? If yes, how did you handle it? Very, very important. How did you handle it, Terry?
Oh yeah. See, here's the thing: is the world will tell you what you should be at any given point in time. And for me, the world was constantly telling me that I was a victim and that I was less than, or that I was fragile, or I was weak. There was a lot of times that, I did buy that when I was younger, because that's what the world showed me, and that's what I bought, and that's what I bought into. Um, but, it wasn't until I really became an adult that I had a defining moment that was kind of a eureka moment in my life as to why you can't let the world define who you are, because whatever you allow the world to do, it's not going to give you what you think is fair, and it's probably going to give you something that's going to really upset you. And for me, it did upset me, and it upset me enough to the point to where I needed to make some changes, to where I just wouldn't accept that title anymore. And that's why I started doing things like firefighting and deep sea commercial diving. It was not just a way to tell myself that I could, but it was also to tell the world that I also could. And that's when I was really relieved of the whole living under the identity of, what the world gave me.
I like that, Terry. You said, don't allow the world to define you, which is very, very powerful. Viewers, if you're hearing this, please do not allow the world to define you. Be yourself, do you, and you'll be good. Okay?
Exactly.
Now, talking about firefighting, Terry, this is amazing because for someone who is a born survivor and you still went back into fire, I mean, I can't fathom that because most people wouldn't want to get near fire again in their life, but you some of the courage to do this. Now, becoming a firefighter is very powerful. What first planted this idea to you, Terry?
Uh, Spite is a hell of a fuel, I'll tell you what. Um,
Yeah,
for me, it was firefighting was the defining moment that I did not allow the world to define me anymore.
correct.
I thought to myself, like, what is what? Well, okay, let me back it up just a little bit. I tried to get a job as an oil technician, just changing oils in a car, right? I'm very mechanically inclined. I can do that with my eyes closed. And I went to go apply to become an oil technician, and the guy took my application and he didn't even look at it. And he said, I can't hire you. You'll be a liability for my company. And something in my brain just finally switched on and said, okay, well, today was the last day of victim mode. I can't do this anymore. What is the one thing I can do to where people are not going to treat me like this anymore? And that's when I started the brainstorming. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm going to try out for firefighting. And I looked up when the local testing and everything was, and I started my process.
For you to be defined by your scars, I mean, is actually crazy. And
Mm.
you knew that you can't keep up with this life, and you had to think about what you can do, which is firefighting. That's an amazing idea, Terry, I must say. Now, I want to ask you, Terry, did you ever doubt whether you could face fire again? I mean, yes, of course, you thought about becoming a firefighter, but did you ever think about being scared of fire? I mean, even on your first day of training,
Hmm.
how was it? Get scared of fire? I mean, and was it a gradual process before you could, get accustomed to the whole firefighting stuff?
So before the academy and everything like that, I was perfectly fine with fire. Like I've had a good love with fire for a long time. Fire is a beautiful thing. It has its destructive purposes, and it doesn't matter who or what's in front of it. Its destructive purposes will do just that. But it also has growing and rebirth behind it, right? So fire isn't inherently a bad thing. It's just the situation I was in was. Um, Now, when I got to academy, I didn't really have any fears or PTSD issues that I was aware of at the time, until I actually did my very first live fire. And that's when they demonstrated fire in a burn room, in a controlled room. But I was on full air and bunker gear and everything else like that. So I was fully safe. But that very first fire that they had, the fire actually kind of took me back to that day as it was coming at me, because the fire that they demonstrated was coming across the ceiling. And with that kind of thing, it comes at you a little bit. And so it kind of took me back to the day that the fire was coming at me during the accident. But by the time the fire got to me, like any kind of fear that I had was just completely whitewashed away. Like I had this realization in my brain that I was in control, that I was in bunker gear, I was training for this, and like any fear that I had left over just completely washed away at that point in time. I actually have a picture of me coming out of that particular fire training, and you could see the look on my face, like I had just like seriously conquered Mount Everest.
Yeah, I saw that too as well. Thank you for the work you do. It's really, truly amazing. Now, Terry, what has your journey taught you about resilience and forgiveness?
So resiliency and forgiveness. Well, the resilience part is just this is that, no matter what in life, you got to keep moving, right? Like you're going to have your highs, you're going to have your lows. You got to have your highs to understand when you're having your lows, and as well as your lows to know when you're having your highs. But the key is that when life gets tough and life gets hard, you gotta keep moving. Even if it's just a little bit, a little every day still will get you to your goal, right? And that's the one thing that I learned, because there was countless days that I was laying in that bed wondering if I was gonna ever make it out of that hospital alive, just because I didn't know. But it was that little bit of faith every single day accumulated into a much grander and bigger picture over a period of time. Um, and resiliency is not something that's going to come easy. It's going to be hard. And anything that's worthwhile is hard, right? I
So,
actually just I heard this quote just the other day. Says you can't have an easy life and a great character, right? Like think about that. You can't have an easy life and a great character. Jimmy Carr said that. You know, so it's one of those things that stuff comes through resiliency, right? You get knocked to your knees. What do? You get back up again. You get knocked down, you know.
Yeah.
Les Paul says if you get knocked down in your back, because if you can look up, you can get up, right? So like resiliency is something we do every day, every single day. You know, we're all practicing it every day. When you get up to get ready to go to work, like that's resiliency in its own. Who really wants to get up and go do that, right? I mean, you have other choices, but you still make the hard choice. So resiliency is something we practice every day, but always practice it when things are really tough, really, really tough. Now, forgiveness is a big one for me too. Forgiveness is so important. And I think it's so important for people to realize that one part of forgiveness that we never really think of is that sometimes forgiveness isn't for other people, sometimes it's for ourselves. Because you may not get the forgiveness that you're looking for from that other person to let go of something. But if you can find that forgiveness within yourself for whatever that situation is, that is a very healing and freeing thing. Forgiveness is huge. You know, I had to learn a lot about forgiveness in the sense of like how society treated me. You know, it wasn't really just follow me with this. It wasn't really society's fault in a lot of ways, because how do you treat someone like me that you don't see very often, right? You don't see people like me because either we don't make it, or if we do make it, we pretty much recluse inside of a house and we never go outside. So when I go outside and I hang out in society and society treats me differently, you know, that's their way of trying to figure out who I am, you know, because they've not seen anyone like me before. So there's a lot of forgiveness and like with working with people, trying to get myself back out there as well, you know, especially for myself, because there'd be times I really hate myself for going out there and putting myself through all that garbage, you know. I mean, like, man, why did I do this? This didn't really seem to like fruit anything. But you know, I had to forgive myself sometimes, because it was like, you know I didn't really appreciate myself, putting myself in that position, but I'm glad that I did, you know. So forgiveness is a really important thing to also really work on, and I think you constantly work on through that throughout life, you know.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Terry. Thank you very much for sharing this, because if we don't forgive ourselves, how do we forgive others in the process? So you need to forgive yourself before you can be able to forgive others. You've done justice to that, Terry. Thank you very much. Now that brings me to my next question, Terry. Now, what does broken nurture mean to you? Because I know you must have seen the name of our podcast. It means a lot. And we always ask this to our guests, because I know, or we know that it would definitely mean a lot to them as well. So what does broken not shattered mean to you, please?
So what this means to me, broken not shattered. You know, honestly, I see this as a really good opportunity to be a part of a movement, to be able to encourage other people in their journeys. Because see, here's the thing: is like we're all on a journey, right? This is what life is all about. We're all out here trying to figure out what life is, and we're doing it, right? But the thing is in our world today, we need a lot of inspiration. We need a lot of hope. We need a lot of positivity, because in every which direction you step in this world right now, it seems like the world kind of siphons those things out of you. So we need groups like Broken Not Shattered to be doing what you're doing, to be able to share other people's stories, because that right there, that is the most important and most powerful piece, is sharing your story. We all have stories, right? You don't become an adult and not have a story. There's some kind of story behind you somewhere, right? But sharing your stories is where we can help one another, but we also help ourselves. And with your guys' platform, you guys are giving people the opportunity to do that in areas and ways that were, you know, may not have been possible. Like for me, for example, I've only been doing my stuff through TikTok. And I've been on like one other podcast before, but you know, you guys have a bunch of eyes and ears and minds and hearts that follow you that I may not have ever seen ever. And so for us combining and intertwining, you know, we get to spread this hope a little bit further. So I think that, you know, broken not shattered is a necessity in the world that we have today.
Thank you very much, Terry. That name means a lot to us, and thank you very much for sharing with us what it really means to you too as well.
Mhm.
Thank you. Now, Terry, we've taken much of your time. We are so sorry about that. We said 30 minutes, but we are above 30 minutes. Now,
No.
there's something podcast, Terry. We call it a drop-off question. Now, the last guest gave us a drop-off question for the next. The
Okay.
last guest doesn't know who you are. They just dropped off a question. Now, we're going to ask you that question. Now, in return, you give us a drop-off question for the next guest. Okay?
Okay.
All right, that's cool. So I'll go ahead and read out the drop-off question for the last. Okay? What would you do to pull yourself out of the negative thought of not being enough as regards imposter syndrome?
Pulling myself out of negative thoughts is something that I've had to do quite a bit. Mental coaching is a big thing for me. And what I mean by that is uh, we are our own worst enemy, in the sense of how our brain operates and how we think. And case in point for that, for me specifically, is like when I would be out in public, right? People stare. That's just what people do. People are naturally curious creatures. But in the very beginning, for me, I thought people were always staring at me with negative aspects of it, of like, oh, this guy must be a monster, or like that's what, is this guy a bad guy for doing what he did? Like my mind negatively would go into that all the time, but I had just it would affect me because my anxiety would just go nuts, and I wouldn't want to be out in public. I wouldn't want to be around people. But then I had to really start coaching myself through that negative mind process of like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe these people don't think that I'm a monster. Maybe these people are just curious as to why I look this way because they haven't ever seen somebody that looks like me. So it took years of cultivating that, and it's hard sometimes to adjust that kind of mindset, but I've done it enough in my life that now today, like I could seriously have a situation arise and it could ruffle my feathers wrong. But I mentally coach myself through it. Is this worth getting myself upset about? Is this worth anxiety for? Am I looking at this in the correct way? It's just like essentially, if I was to try and coach somebody else through a negative mindset, how would I do that for myself? And that's what I do. And I've done it fairly well over, I've done it fairly well over the last 33 years.
Wow. Terry, thank you very much for being in the studio today with us to share your story. And I believe our audience must have taken one or two from your story and they will apply it to. Terry, what would be the advice that you would give to someone that is a born survivor? What would be your advice? Because they might not know what they've, but you've been there for years and you know how to navigate your life. So what would be the advice that you would share to them if they are watching on this podcast right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. My biggest point of advice that I've always given to people in that situation is to fall in love with yourself, and give that time. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And I know it sounds really kind of silly, probably, but when people that I've worked with that have gone through burn experiences, some of the first things is that they feel very distant from themselves. Well, because your body has changed, right? And that has caused you to kind of separate yourself from yourself. One of the biggest things that I've worked with most burn survivors on is find a way to fall back in love with yourself. That way you're going to advocate for yourself. You'll set boundaries for yourself. You'll make sure that you're taking care of yourself like you're valued. And the reason why this is so important is because when you also get to that stage to where you genuinely, truly do love yourself, right? Not only have you done yourself a service on being able to heal yourself internally, but you've also established the fertile grounds for confidence. So once you start to go out into public and other places that are going to be difficult, you're going to have that to lean on. Because when you love yourself at that particular level that I'm talking about, other people's opinions don't matter, in that sense. And that works a lot for everybody, not just burn survivors in general. I think just as a generalized group of people, we all could learn to love ourselves a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Terry. Now, before we go, I would like you to give us your own drop-off question. Now, you've answered the drop-off question I gave you. Now, what will be your own drop-off question to the next guest?
My drop-off question is what is your go-to self-care routine to refill your cup?
Wow, that's amazing. Straightforward, Terry. Straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
So the next guest, this will be your drop off question. Okay. Thank you very much,
Yep.
Terry. Now, where can people find you, Terry? If someone wants to contact you to ask you questions, where can people find you?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, you can find me on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok with under Phoenix Down with Terry. Or you can just Google Phoenix Down and it'll bring up all sorts of stuff for me, and then you can reach out to me that way. I do TikToks live almost daily through TikTok. So
You heard it from Terry, the audience. Please move ahead to go to his channel. Ask him whatever you want to ask him. He'll be available to help you out. Thank you very much, Terry, and thank you very much to everyone for
thank you.
joining us. Do not forget, we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we're on Spotify. Please do well to follow us and share our podcast. We always come live every Sunday. Thank you very much, Terry. Take care.
All right, have a good one. Thank you.